There was an angry gathering in the small Victorian town of Murchison last week after it emerged their local not-for-profit aged care facility had been placed in administration.
The past cannot be changed, but we hope we can repair it.
An effective campaign saw Deputy Prime Minister Michael McCormack pressed on the issue when he visited the area, quickly signalling an intervention at the highest levels.
Obviously this is very worrying for not only the residents but for their family and loved ones and the community. We will get the right response.
The government said yesterday that it had found an operator for the home, but there was an important caveat: more federal funding. And the problem for the DP Jones nursing home in Murchison, and indeed for the sector as a whole, is a lack of federal money.
You were Treasurer, you cut $2 billion from aged care. And then
that's what the Labor Party said.
No, you did.
I know the Labor Party said that.
No, you cut $1.2 million.
No, I don't accept that. So if people want to put questions, they're not allowed to put lies, OK?
Had $1.2
billion. No, we're increasing aged care funding by $1 billion every year, and we put in place compliance measures to ensure that public funds don't get misused.
The aged care funding instrument had $1.2 billion taken from...
This is why we're going to have a Royal Commission.
The Royal Commission into Aged Care, triggered in part by horrifying stories of abuse aired by Four Corners, has released its interim findings with a cover line that didn't pull any punches. It foreshadows a massive overhaul of how the entire aged care sector is funded, the details to come in the final report next year. But Scott Morrison has more urgent problems. With the industry warning many nursing homes are on the brink of closure, the government will have to decide whether to inject billions into a funding system many see as broken and all but certain to be replaced.
Just last week, 2 homes in rural communities closed. We should be doing everything we possibly can right now to make the aged care system better right now. And we know that part of that is around funding. Presently today, nearly 50% of residential aged care providers are operating at a loss. We can't wait for another 12 months.
Ian Yates from the Council on the Ageing is watching intently as the Commission moves to regional Australia. He concedes some rural providers might need a top-up, but is otherwise opposed to any more cash injections.
We have seen too many cash injections that have not led to any change in the quality of care or lack of quality of care provided.
The government has already done a one-off cash top-up of $320 million back before the election, which breeds cynicism about where any future top-ups would go.
It would enable us to either have more contact care hours with older Australians or employ more staff. And we acknowledge that if there was more funding coming into the sector, there needs to be transparency with how that money is spent, because it's only right and appropriate that the rest of the country and the community can see exactly what is being delivered for the money that the taxpayer spends.
It frequently does not go to staff. The last round of $320 million before the election went significantly to bottom lines.
The interim report does recommend some immediate action. Firstly, much more funding for home care packages. There are an estimated 120,000 people on the waiting list right now. And the Royal Commission says this has contributed to unnecessary and premature deaths and pushed people into nursing homes or into the care of their friends and family.
16,000 people died last year waiting for care that never came.
Meeting the enormous demand for home care will mean huge growth in the companies that provide carers. And this rapid expansion is not without risk. The Commission heard allegations that one provider's negligence led to food poisoning and hospitalisations. But there will be a funding injection for home care at least, and the Minister is keeping his options open for spending in other areas.
The PM did say on Friday that there'll be more funding for home care packages. We'll be going through our usual budgetary processes to look at what areas of the industry require additional support. It may be that some of the other recommendations from the Royal Commission require us to provide some funding as well, and we'll consider that.
The Commission also wants urgent action to tackle the over-reliance on chemical restraints in institutions, saying the current regime, where doctors and pharmacists are only funded to check prescriptions every 1 or 2 years, needs to change. And it said steps should be taken to stop younger people with a disability ending up in aged care homes. Too often it's seen as the default. These are all things the Commission says can be improved right now, but governments have a poor record acting on such advice. There have been a staggering 41 inquiries into the sector since 1997, 20 of them in the last decade. But the Commission said it was often difficult to figure out what the government had actually done in response. or responses would come years later and only make vague references to the findings. The Royal Commission has started a new round of public hearings focused on regional and remote areas. Aged care facilities outside the big cities have particular issues, with 74% operating at a loss, like the home in Murchison. The Royal Commission is sitting in Mudgee in central western New South Wales, a town of almost 12,000 people, with a higher proportion of older people than the national average and a higher proportion of jobs in the aged care sector. The government now has a timing problem, pressure for immediate action, but a 12-month delay until the Commission's final report. That's a particular problem in the bush. Aged homes are often big employers in towns hit hard by the drought. If the aged care goes, so do the jobs, and often so do associated services like medical centres. In Murchison, the deadline for the home to be put in liquidation is Wednesday.
Hi, I'm Lee Sales. Thanks for watching this story. If you'd like to watch more of 730's stories, they are on the left of your screen. And tap on the button below to subscribe and get the latest from ABC News.